Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today's workshop, Confidence Strategies to Build Confidence on Stage and in Our Daily Lives, with our guest speaker today, Matt Mosich. Now, before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Since this is an interactive webinar, we ask that you please remain muted for the presentation. But if you do have questions for Matt, please feel free to use the raise hand feature and we can call on you where you can ask your questions live, or you can also use the chat feature. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce everyone to Matt. Matt, take the floor.
Thank you, Tanya, and appreciate you all being here today. Like Tanya said, I'm Matt Mosich, and today we're here to talk about confidence, which is a really funny topic for me to be talking about. At least if you would have told myself 4 years ago, this was a topic of my presentation, I wouldn't have quite believed you. But through a process, through time, I've learned how to build confidence. And because it took me so long, I actually know how it all came together. Now, you're all here for a reason, so maybe this question feels a little rhetorical, but who wants more confidence? If you can do me a quick favor, I can't see you all. Can you just drop me a thumbs up, a yes, a smile, a heart in the chat, just so I can know that we're here, we're engaged, and we're all looking to learn. Gemma, thank you. Appreciate that little thumbs up there. Perfect. I can see you guys. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you all just taking a moment here to engage. Anthony, thank you. There's more to this than me just trying to not feel like a floating head. Your engagement in today's presentation is actually to your benefit. A 1998 study showed that passive listeners actually retain 30% less than active listeners. So for that reason, I want to make today interactive. There will be moments. There'll be other moments for anyone who just was getting ready, didn't have the chance to interact right there, to help yourself to become more confident through being an engaged listener. There'll be questions, moments for you to throw something in the chat, and also too, like Tanya hinted at, there is a reserved question answer segment. But if you have a question in the midst of this presentation, go ahead, throw it in the chat. I'll have momentary breaks where I can answer those questions live so that you are in line, in tune, ready to go. Now, I started my business about 2 years ago, and one of my first clients was, well, it still is, this force of nature. Fortunately for myself, I did not know who I was cold calling when I first reached out to her, but we had a great conversation, got straight to work. It was only in future times that I was at industry conferences where I realized just who she was to everyone. She'd spent 30 years in the C-suite at mega RIAs. She transitioned to starting her own consulting practice and was through that getting asked to speak at conferences, podcasts, and had a laundry list of prospects lining up for her attention. So you got to imagine externally to the world, you have this aura of confidence, well-earned confidence. But it was interesting because the person that I knew before I heard all of this deserved every ounce of confidence that people saw. But in this new stage of her life, it wasn't quite there yet. And she'd often ask me a question, something to the sort of, how do I get this feeling to go away? Trust me, I've been there before. I've wanted it to evaporate. And it actually isn't exactly what we would want. But I'm curious just for you to reflect and think, is there somewhere in your life where you feel that pressure mount? Be it a stage, a sales conversation, or maybe it's something different, going to the gym, whatever it may be. Where do you feel the pressure mount? Where does that come up for you? Where are you trying to build confidence? Just take a moment to think about that, because at the end of the day, the goal here is to help you take positive steps towards building confidence in that arena. Now, when I would talk to this client of mine, basically what I tell her is a little bit of what I just said there. That confidence isn't this absence of pressure. It's not that you are going to omit it. And like I said, you don't want it to totally go away. It's a signal that you care. It's a signal that you're doing something right, but it's your ability to move through it that really defines your ability to be confident. So today, my promise to you all is we're going to talk about those moments. We're going to talk about where pressure builds and build some context around where that is in your life. But I want to provide you a way that you can build confidence in those settings so that you can move through it when that pressure comes, when it counts. And ultimately, it'll all be based around a system that helps you compound confidence over time. Now, this might feel like somewhat of a rhetorical question, but we're still going to ask it anyways. Why does confidence matter? When you're confident, when you show up with confidence, you speak in a way where your ideas land. You speak with conviction. And because of that, your influence grows. Ultimately, when your influence grows, you speak with this conviction, people start to trust you. They see you as an authority. But when it doesn't, when that confidence isn't quite there, you might rush. Opportunities, because of that, they might shrink. And people don't necessarily see you as the person to listen to, so they might tune out. So confidence matters. It's something that we want to bring to these settings. And I'm curious, though, if we can just take a moment. I'm not expecting you to tell me about a moment where you might have seen it, but can you think of a moment over the past couple of weeks where you or someone that you saw, if they showed up in a conversation, if they showed up on a stage with more confidence, that it might have changed the outcome? Just drop a yes in the chat if you can think of a moment where that might have been helpful. Nancy, by all means, sure. We'll take it. We'll take it. Now, David, thank you. Yeah, okay. We're all on board. I can think of many moments, even in my own life, where if I could have just shown up with a little bit more confidence, then yes, maybe I could have changed that outcome. Now, confidence in and of itself, it's tricky. And before I was where I am today, I used to have this erroneous definition of what confidence is. And I first want to dispel that myth. I used to believe that a confident person was this immovable object, a stone figure, a stoic, kind of like a relic of the past. And there was an issue with that feeling, that underlying definition, because I am an emotional human, as we all are. I'm not going to walk into just any setting with this impervious feeling. I'm going to have emotion. I might have doubt, uncertainty. And because of that old definition, I wasn't able to ever really feel confident because how could I achieve that? And that's a fundamental issue with this idea of confidence. It's something I want to first dispel. Mark Manson, a prolific author, I'll omit the name of the book. I can see some of you might know, uh, has a quote about confidence. It's my definition that I like to hold on to. Confidence is not a belief in success. It's a comfort with failure. Because the reality is, when I step up on stage, when I'm delivering a keynote, when I'm taking on a new client, I'm not 100% sure that it's going to go exactly as I hope. But I do have this underlying belief that has come through time, that when I inevitably mess up, when I fail, I'm going to be able to get back up, I'm going to be able to learn and try again. And that's what a confident person really holds on to, is not this 100% belief, but it's this understanding, this trust in themselves. So first and foremost, that's how I view confidence. And with that definition, we might ask, well, then how do we begin to build it? How do we begin to embody that belief? And it's actually quite simple. It's as simple as ABC. The truth about building confidence is action builds confidence. ABC. Now, there's part of me that just wants to sit here and say, yay, we're done. Action builds confidence. That's the root of it. And it's true. It really is. But there's this other challenge that I ran into, and I see in people who come to me time and time again, is they know they want to build confidence. And they understand that they need to start taking action. But the challenge becomes, well, what action do I take? I don't know exactly what it is that I'm trying to do. And even if I have an idea, I'm trying to get more sales in my business. I'm trying to better understand this portfolio strategy. I'm trying to bring myself into the light of speaking. Where do I even start? And that's what I'm here to teach you. In April of 2021, I passed my CFP exam. Great, hurrah. This was a big moment in my young wealth management career. Not only for the fact of having passed the exam, but a year before, it was in part the decision that was made to take the exam. That was me telling myself, this was the career for me. I wanted to do this. I was ready to give it my all. So you've got to imagine that it was difficult, challenging. Maybe those are light words. It was really tough. When less than a week later, a thought passed through my mind. Did I want to do this for the rest of my career? And initially, I fought with it quite a bit because I loved what I did. It gave me a lot of purpose. I worked with fantastic people and I helped them with something that was truly impactful. But over the next 8 months, I noodled around with this idea quite a bit. And what I came to find is that that same motivation that had pushed me to study pretty much every single night, weekends for that year straight, it just wasn't there anymore. So I found myself asking myself this question that I never expected to ask myself ever again. What do I do? At a total loss, total uncertainty of what that answer might be, I remembered a book that I had read before that might be useful. Now, before I keep going, quick question, only because a lot of people I've met in this industry may have heard of him before. Raise of hands or just drop it in the comments. Anyone ever heard of Brian Margolis? There you go. Dustin, you have, yep. I thought I might get a yes or two in there. He does some training within the industry, and a lot of it's behind this idea of the book that he wrote called The Index Card Business Plan. And the Index Card Business Plan is a powerful book from the standpoint of how practical it is. It's a book that describes a way to take your big goals and take them and turn them into small, weekly, measurable, actionable steps that you can take to make to bring success into varying aspects of your life. And he breaks down the process into pillars. Relationships, health, business, you can decide what the pillars were, but those were the ones that felt most fundamental to me. And it was pretty easy for me when I was going through this process to think of the first two. Relationships. Reality was, after I left college, I made a somewhat sincere effort to keep up with people that were close to me, but it just faded and faded and faded. So I told myself I was going to make 3 outbound calls a week to people who meant the world to me. I told myself I was going to do 1 surf session a week. After living in California for 27 years at the time, I was tired of getting asked the question, do you surf? And I was tired of getting thrown off by 1-foot waves. So I made that a priority. But remember, I didn't understand what I wanted to do. So what could I do for business? I came up with something vague and uncertain, but I defined it to make it more powerful. I decided I was going to track moments outside of my comfort zone. Now, that in and of itself, like I said, vague, but I defined what my comfort zone was. I realized that I had a lot of trouble making random introductions, meeting new people. So moments where I introduced myself to someone would be a moment. Networking events, especially going solo, they were tricky. So that was another one. Posting on LinkedIn, another one. And I identified these moments where I would get in my own way and just felt like, I don't know if this is exactly what I need to do, but it is getting in motion. That process in and of itself ultimately is responsible for why I'm in front of you today. But the process in and of itself, do you have to go through that exact process? No, not necessarily. Because I understand you're all here today not saying that you want to change lines of business, but it's more so, how do we build confidence? And confidence, like I said, is rooted in action. So that process gave me the ability to take the actions that I felt I needed to become more successful in where I wanted to be. But what happened was every time I took one of those steps, every time I completed one of those cards, I added a book into my library of confidence. A book, a library that I could lean on in moments of uncertainty and say, well, you know what? I think this is going to go better than I expected because of all these other moments too. And it became a positive spiral of momentum. In reflection, I've since realized that the process that I went through can really be boiled down to three P's. These being the essential parts in the confidence building process, and we'll walk through each of them. First one being promises, the promises we keep to ourselves and others. I want to go through a quick thought exercise. I'm going to ask for engagement in the chat box. This one isn't all too complex, just a couple of numbers if you can throw them out there for me. If you had a doctor's appointment at 11 a.m. on Thursday, so tomorrow, what time would you show up? 10:50, 10:45, 10:55. Exactly. I'd probably be about in the same boat. 10:58. Yep, there we go. 10:59, 10. There we go. We're early though. We're early. A little bit early, some more so than others, but we're a little bit early. Now, what about if your child had a baseball game at 9 a.m. this Saturday? What time would you get there? 8:30, 8:55. There we go. 8:30, 8:15. Perfect. I was wondering if I might get any 7 o'clocks, like my dad would make me to do batting practice before practice. But by all means, so we're all early. Now, here's the tricky one, and please know I'm not pointing fingers, I'm pointing fingers at myself. If you told yourself you're going to go to the gym tomorrow at 6:30, what time would you show up? Now, this one's somewhat rhetorical. If you want to answer, you can, but there we go, David. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm in the same boat. I realized going through this process, 5 p.m. Yep. 5 p.m. if I even showed up. Um, I realized when I was going through this process and I was going through these pillars that the fact was I hadn't been all that good about making promises to myself. And what ultimately had happened there is I just saw these things that I wanted to do as too far out of reach because I hadn't really honored the promises I made myself in the past. Now, we can take that. We can actually take that. I took it and used it. And I said, well, I would love to get better about the promises I make to myself. But what if I loop in other people? So in this pillar process, what I did was A, I looped in my wife, and B, created a monetary reward about all the things. If I didn't cross it, then I'd have to pay her. I had zero financial benefit. She had all the benefit. It was a win-win for her. But it really did keep me in motion because I wanted to honor those promises to her. So that in and of itself helped me to get some proof. So it was in this process of going through these pillars that I started to see, well, I could keep my promises. I had proof of that, even if it was more to keep promises for someone else. But I also began to get proof that my worries, they were far bigger than any of the results. A lot of those conversations that came from this became friendships, became connections, became whatever it may be. But a whole lot happened just because of that. I realized I was more capable than I believed. This guy who had no idea what he wanted to do suddenly was making traction, and it was happening out of what felt like nowhere, but it was really coming out of action. But most importantly, I learned that I could trust myself, that if I wanted to set out on something, that I could actually get it done. And that was a positive reinforcing moment, which ultimately gave me this newfound perspective. This perspective that what confidence really is a skill. It's a skill that we can build. That the rejection that inevitably happened, it wasn't like every single piece of this went perfectly, but it was a rep. It was a chance for me to test myself and remember that I could get back up again if I fell. That failure, what it really was feedback. And the fear in moments where I was in the spotlight like this, well, what would that otherwise be is nervousness is really excitement. And I started to develop this new perspective around the world and around myself and the possibilities. And this confidence just began to grow. So if I had to boil down confidence, it really came down to these three P's. It was a process for getting in motion by making promises to myself and effectively to other people, which then helped me to establish proof, which then granted me a new perspective. A new perspective, like how I talked to my client from earlier, and helped her to understand really what the opportunity was that she had at hand. Now, some brief comments before we loop into some more formal question segment. First and foremost, this has been an underlying theme. Confidence is contextual. I had a certain amount of confidence going into, say, stages. Speaking in public, I've been doing this for a number of years before I started my business. But at the same time, I wasn't, say, confident in sales conversations, and it might be the same for you. Maybe you're confident in your ability to get to the gym, but maybe you're not confident in delivering that new portfolio quite yet. But ultimately, what it is, how you build confidence is within applying these lessons within those segments. Confidence isn't always baseline, but it does build in context. And effectively, how it builds is through consistent, repeatable action. Action despite the fact that you don't know how things are going to go. But by keeping those promises to yourself, proof will be earned. And with that, that trust will build in your ability to step into these environments, but also to succeed in those moments. Or, if you fail, to get back up again, like we talked about earlier. Now, I would be just a talking head if I weren't to ask you, and this one's for you. You don't have to put this in the chat. If you're bold, you can. You can make a promise to the group here. But when we talked earlier about the areas where you're looking to build confidence, what came to mind? And what's something that you can think about and commit to that you can do something small that you can do this week to begin getting in that motion to build and become more confident in that arena? I'm going to take a micro moment here for you just to think about this. And my ask would be to write it down. I found writing to be a very great way for me to commit to something. Now, as you're doing that, my business was built around this understanding, this idea that I had when I was 21 years old. It wasn't as, say, well written as it is today, but the underlying idea was that our communication defines our reputation. When I work with people, whether it's one-on-one, oh, actually, well, side note, I'm going to stop. Nancy, thank you. Negotiating with my lawyer for an improved working relationship. I appreciate you putting that in the chat. So I want to pause and commend you for doing that. Now, again, back to the business, it was built around this idea, and confidence being one of those pieces of our communication, one of those pieces that defines how people see us. And it's a small piece of what I teach people, whether it's one-on-one or in trainings. I'll leave it at that, but if you have any interest, I'd be happy to have a conversation. As we lead into the question segment, I have one final ask. I have a small QR code. I'd appreciate if you just gave me some feedback on today. There's 5 questions in there. It is entirely anonymous unless you choose for it not to be. Would really appreciate if you were to take out your phones and just scan that while we're going through this question segment. Now, in the context of questions, we can talk about confidence. We can talk about what we talked about today, whether it's putting this into practice or anything that's bubbled up in your mind. We can talk about communication broadly, how different ways that we project confidence in our communication, or we can talk about the stage. By all means, I'm an open book. I don't withhold anything, and I'd love to hear who has the first question. Now, if we're waiting right now for some of you to think about what that question might be, I'm going to pose one that comes up quite a bit when I'm working with clients. And that is, what are some tips for how I can appear more confident in person and in a virtual environment? One thing is, you might have noticed this, hopefully it wasn't too much, but I like to think that the hands are the windows to the soul. When we hide our hands, we send a subtle signal to whoever it is that we're talking to that there is something to hide. Now, more importantly, when we show our hands, we show that we don't have anything to hide, that we're open, that we're warm, and that we're engaged in a conversation. So whenever I'm walking into, say, a Zoom room or an in-person meeting, I always make sure to show my palms and to establish that immediate warmth. There are some subtle things, though. Each of us has different habits that we might do, whether it's different filler words or different ways that it's called pacifying behavior, where we kind of relieve stress. And sometimes those can come up in stressful environments. It's hard to work on them if we're not quite aware of what they might be. In this virtual world, we do have a little bit of something that we can use to our own benefit, which is we can record our sessions. Now, I know that not everyone might have that opportunity. I know when I was at Merrill, I didn't have the chance to record my meetings, but maybe you do some private one-off meetings, or you can just record yourself answering questions with ChatGPT. It's important that we, like a professional athlete might, watch our film. If we're not quite sure what we do when the pressure turns on, we can simulate environments just to see if there's anything that we might be accidentally doing that can take away from our aura of confidence. So to identify those, I recommend recording yourself and watching a little bit of film. And having that awareness can help you to take a positive step in having that confident presence. Oh, beautiful. Gemma, I appreciate that question. What are some strategies for more concise and clear communication? There is a conversation framework or a question answer framework that I love. It's called point, reason, point. You may have heard it in a different context. Tell them what you're going to tell them, tell them, tell them what you told them. I teach this framework to my clients just because of how powerful it is in the context of a conversation. When you're delivering a question, begin with your point. So you tell them what you're going to tell them. In the context of what I just said, the question answer framework that I use is point, reason, point. Then you tell them why, the reason. I love that and use it for years. Beautiful, Nancy. Yeah, it's we don't need to have a million different frameworks or anything new. We just need to have something that we can rely on. And on that point, so the reason being the why behind it, Simon Sinek says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. If you just tell people the point, they're going to kind of question where you came to your answer. By delivering the reason, you give them enough context for them to trust you. And then ending with the point again, it signals the end. It is another benefit of it too, is it allows you to know where you're going and keep your answer clear and concise throughout. So the question answer framework I use and how I stay more clear and concise is relying on point, reason, point. There we go. Thanks for the question, Gemma. I appreciate it. How do you appear confident without appearing arrogant? Ooh, that's a good question, Michael. I've never been asked that before, but I have a gut instinct on how I would answer it. I think the difference between confidence and arrogance comes down to intent. Are you projecting confidence because you want to seem confident? Or are you projecting confidence because you're clear, you're certain, and you just want to get your point across? I would say, if anything, it comes down to intent. And at least for you, Michael, I would say asking that question in and of itself is already in the right framing to be approaching questions with confidence rather than arrogance. Cade, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, give me just a moment so I can read through this. I'm not confident in public speaking, get anxious. I'm forced to do it and I get through it, but it never seems to get easier. How do I build confidence if it makes me anxious each time? Despite having the proof, I'm able to get through it. Another great question. Cade, I don't know if you can come unmuted. I just have another question behind it. Have you ever tried being in a public speaking group? I'm not sure if you can, I know you say you're getting reps. So let me do my best to answer this. I've tried Toastmasters before. Yeah, okay. You took my easy answer out. But no, that is a nuanced question. So I'm not sure that this is going to be the perfect answer, but I would try to do a little bit of trickery with what's going on inside your brain. Throughout my life, there have been times where I know something and I tell myself it and I tell myself it and I tell myself it, but I don't fully believe it. And then one day, something happens where I believe it and I understand it. And it's like this huge shift happens where all of a sudden I've embodied it, I've seen it, and I never really go back to it again. I don't know if this is the perfect fix, but my thought is to just keep telling yourself that it's something that you look forward to, that it's actually exciting you. And more importantly, I would say that it just means that you care about what you're doing. When I present, even today, I feel a certain amount of anxiety, pressure, nervousness, but I've learned to tell myself that it means that I care about what I'm doing, that it is really me being excited about the opportunity at hand, and that I look forward to it. Again, it's not going to be easy right off the bat, but I would try changing how you talk to yourself about it and see if you just, as you continue to get reps and continue to find silver linings within them, if over time that perspective might change. Hmm. As someone who has switched careers, what is an effective way you've found to deal with imposter syndrome? By all means, Kate, I'm here for you. Imposter syndrome. Yeah, that's a fun one. When I was in wealth management, I remember being 22 years old, getting asked by someone who had over $100 billion about what he should do with his loan management account, basically his line of credit. And I was baffled because I learned what a line of credit was about a week before. I told myself, okay, hey, this is cool, crazy, but it's a signal. It's a signal for me to really take these opportunities, this embarrassment, and to learn from it. How I approached it in that setting was to really just outwork it. That was part of the catalyst of the CFP. It was part of the catalyst for really getting my seven. But I would say one thing that I've thought a lot about since is that embarrassment is an opportunity. I have gotten embarrassed so many times in the context of these past 2 years. It's hard to count. And if I would have known, I don't know if I would have done it. But early on, I came across this idea of an opportunity mindset. The idea being if we see something as a threat, we treat it as a threat. If we see something as an opportunity, we treat it as an opportunity. So one day after getting asked by a dear friend, fortunately, what am I going to do? And I stumbled through the most pathetic response ever. I was really in my head for about 10 minutes until I stopped and said, well, this is going to happen. I didn't have a good response yet. I used that yet as a chance to build my personal FAQ. But the idea behind it being, I've been in so many rooms where I felt uncomfortable that I've just learned to feel that it's innate to it. And when I stumble, I see it as an opportunity, and I've created the response of taking those moments, reflecting on them, and giving myself a second rep. Sure thing, Anthony. Are there any other questions I have? Oh, there we go. Do you have a confidence framework for interviews, especially virtual Zoom ones? I'm not sure if it's a confidence framework, Kirk. I appreciate the question, but I do think I have something that might address what you're talking about. Especially now, podcasts are prevalent. And even too, if you're getting asked to speak at an industry event, it will more often be a panel than a workshop or a keynote, meaning you're in an environment where you don't know exactly what's going to happen. So you can't perfectly prepare for that moment. You have to find a way to get prepared while also being comfortable with the unexpected. There are a few things that I do heading into, say, an interview to make sure that I feel comfortable enough to be confident and allow the conversation to go where it wants to go. First and foremost, I think about my three main takeaways. I understand who I'm speaking to, why I'm speaking to them, what they need. And I think about the three things that they would really need to take home for it to be a successful conversation for me. Well, for me and mainly for them. I also will ask myself a variety of questions in advance, which are, I guess, behind those three main points, which are who am I talking to? Why are they in the audience? What do I hope they walk away with? And what action do I suggest that they might do? That way I have at least a framing of where I'd like the conversation to go. And that gives me enough comfortability and confidence to feel dynamic in the moment and to get through the initial uncertainty. So I hope that answers your question, Kirk. I'm going to give time to see if there's any more questions. Getting close on time. I have one final comment. It's something quick. I'm going to move into my comments. I think that's the questions for the day. If one more comes through, I'll answer it. Or you're also welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn or email just with your questions. I'm happy to answer anything specific if there's something that you had bubbling up but just didn't want to ask in front of the group. Well, CFA Society San Francisco, I genuinely appreciate your time, your attention, your interaction. If there's one thing that we can take away from today, well, it's, confidence, it's a skill. And there's a process to build it. And I hope that the process that I've gone through might be useful for you. But the other day, I was on a walk with my wife, and she asked me if there's anything that's been on my mind lately. She might not have been asking for this, but this is where my mind went. And I said, well, yeah, there has been. And it's this idea that everything is a skill. That process I went through the past 4 years, what it's really taught me is if you want something, if you want it bad enough, you can build it. It's not magic, it's much like a muscle. It takes time, consistency, intent, but with that, we can build it, and confidence is totally accessible to you. Thank you again for your time. I genuinely appreciate it. Tanya, back to you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And on the chat, I did include Matt's LinkedIn and email address if you'd like to connect with him. But with that, we'll go ahead and close out if there's no other final questions. And this workshop was recorded, so we'll be sure to share it with everybody who attended today. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.